You have a question?
Yeah, I'm just very curious about, and forgive me, it's kind of a global question, but how the economic landscape of CROs in terms of, what is the financial gain for a hospital typically, and then obviously the CROs contract with the pharmaceutical device companies and so forth, and they are kind of brokering the research at these various different clinical sites. And one thing that's very clear to me in the American health system is that you need to have some form of lift with top line revenue or a tremendous cost savings to really move things forward. And so I'm just curious, like, what is a typical hospital paid for a typical drug research trial? And maybe it varies, but I just, whatever you could share in terms
Sure.
of that market would
Joe, just
be
briefly,
helpful.
just briefly introduce yourself so he knows where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah. So Joe Morgan, anesthesiologist, University of Buffalo graduate.
Oh, cool.
I lived in Kenmore for a couple of years.
I'm up in Clarence.
Okay, yeah. My first experience in healthcare was there. I was a volunteer for a couple of years there at Kenmore Mercy.
Yep.
And
Great
I was
hospital.
a nurse's aide there for a while, and that was the first thing I did. So
Thank you. Okay, so we have 9 minutes left, Irfan.
Yeah. So, the economics for research. So I'll put it this way. The CROs have their role to play. Circuit's actually in a space below them called the Integrated Research Organization, which is really our job is to integrate research into new to research healthcare spaces to kind of activate that other 95% of our infrastructure. The Kenmore Mercy's of the world is a good example. And so the economics, if you think about it, right now, these health systems cannot access any of this opportunity, right? This work is traditionally going to these academic sites, brick and mortar research sites that have been around for 20 years, and these kind of private equity backed roll-ups of those sites into these large site networks. That's just kind of the landscape of where most clinical trials are done. Private single sites, private research site networks that are scaling. There's about 15 of them right now that have been private equity backed roll-ups that are going on. And they're, again, they've got great track records of execution excellence and effectiveness. They're just not healthcare spaces in the classic sense. And then the academics, all of the big names that we all know. And every city's got one of those. So the opportunity for these health systems is that with very little financial, operational, or regulatory risk, we eat that. They can join. So we don't charge health systems to join Circuit. What we do is partner with them. And so in that partnership, for example, they share data with us, right? So we are able to work with the EMRs and identify patients. Our teams can figure out where these patients are, call the right ones, that kind of thing. So they share data. They provide space for us to work. We usually build an office inside the health system to make it as simple as, again, the goal is to make it as easy for the patients as possible. Our theory is really pretty simple. We think more people will say yes to research if they are asked by doctors and nurses they already trust in spaces that they already drive to and come anyway. And we think that's a better, simple, it's not very dramatic or super innovative sounding, but it's actually new. I mean, there really hasn't been done that way before. We've been in the business for 60 years of taking the patient that we want and pulling them to the trial. And what we're saying is in both decentralized technologies, like, essentially teleresearch, they help as well. But people do want to see their doctors, and especially if they're making a difficult decision like this. So our goal is to make it as easy for the health system to say yes. So it's really not about charging the health system. It's more about saying we can partner, and here's the rack of work to do. And depending on how much work you want to do, here's what you can get paid for this sort of stuff. If we're going to split it 50-50, great, all the rest of that stuff. But it doesn't take much for an existing health system. If you think about those costs, EMR access, physician time that we pay for, and space to work, those are all sunk costs. So any revenue generated essentially drops to the bottom line. And if you think about healthcare systems being, 2 to 3% margin companies, if you're doing 20 or 30 clinical trials a year, you're talking about serious value going right to the bottom line profit.
Right.
That's useful for the health systems. That works in this year's this reality we're all living in.
Thank you.
So I
appreciate that.
Yeah, we have time for one more brief question. Anybody want to give it a shot?
I have a quick follow-up then. in terms of that transparency that you mentioned, and kind of the execution where you're saying, you know, this is essentially what we would get, this is what you would get. Is that generally the approach you take? Or, you know, because there's a wide range in terms of how people approach that.
Yeah, we are looking for, so what we always say is that, because, you know, we've learned a lot over 6 years in terms of what deals don't work for us. So when we meet even big systems and they're like, well, this is the doctor who's willing to do one trial with you to see how it goes, we're always like, this is a really great example of what's not a good fit. But we can introduce you to friends of ours who are brokers who like to do it that way. But we're only interested in working with health systems that want to spin up a clinical trials program within 3 years. They want to be doing 30 to 40 clinical trials across 5 or 6 therapeutic areas. That's the good fit for us. So to get that, you have to be super transparent with everybody. Plus, it's our first value. You know, candidly, both internally inside the company, once a month on Zoom, we show our interns our cash on hand, our burn rate, all the rest of that sort of stuff. We're like we like the Netflix Google approach, right? Open by default until proven otherwise, and that works pretty well for us. So our system partners like it too.
Great. So
Absolutely, that's a good question.
What now that we're running out of time, unfortunately. So first of all, thanks very much. Great story, continued success, really fun. Great peer example of physician entrepreneurship. So what's the final parting words? And if people want to get in touch with you, hope you don't mind, I gave them your email address and your website, but if,
definitely email me.
Yeah, what's the parting words of wisdom?
If you are, especially if you're a physician thinking about something, working on a project, whether it's you know, I mean, it's so funny. My friends, when I left EP, were like, why didn't you just come up with a new catheter? I'm like, do you think if I could have come up with a new catheter, I would be doing this? God knows I tried to come up with a new catheter. My brain won't develop one. What do you want? Like, you know, this is the idea. I'm stuck. You know, that would have been way better. So if you're working on any of those things, I will say this: there is a very small community of physician entrepreneurs. Arlen is its godfather. He's been extremely helpful to me, but we are all in it together. I remember when I left medicine, I got texts and emails within the first couple of days saying, I know it feels like you just stepped off the cliff into the abyss, right? You didn't. You know, this is going to be very interesting and positive for your career, and we're here to help. And that's absolutely been the truth. So you can never pay those things back. You can only pay them forward. So if I can be of help at all, just shoot me an email. Great.
And so I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm, engagement, great questions. And another positive point that I just want to leave you with is that this whole area, we're doing a lot to educate people, particularly pre-meds, med students, residents, fellows, people early in practice. So I think you're going to see a lot of movement. We already are, in terms of, for example, data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, digital health, decentralized clinical trials, all this stuff. So I think you're going to see a lot more enthusiasm and engagement as people go through school and graduate, which I think really is the ultimate point. So thanks again to everybody, and we'll see you next time on this ABAIM SoPE First Friday. So
thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity, Arlen. Thanks so much. See you guys.
Yeah, good seeing you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.